Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. And in today's range report, we're going to be looking at another pistol that has attained cult-like status. And that, of course, is going to be the HK P7 M10. Now, the P7 itself is that legendary gun that people will pay way too much money for. People think it is just one of the greatest pistols that has ever been made. And this cult-like status puts it in the same echelon as the old Colt Pythons and the Mateba Unica 6 auto revolvers. The prices on all these guns just keep going up and up because of collectors. This is a mechanically very interesting gun. It uses a gas piston delayed system. There's a little piston underneath here, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But also, it requires the squeezing of a cocker to bring the striker back so you can fire it. And that cocker is right here on the front strap of the pistol. So if you're going to fire this, you have to squeeze it like that, which pulls the striker back, and you can see it is back when that little nub is protruding out the rear, and then you can fire the gun. Otherwise, nothing will happen. It's pretty much like nothing else you have ever fired or have in your collection. This gun was partially made famous by Hans Gruber in the movie Die Hard, but he had an M13, which is chambered in 9mm, but this is the M10, a rare variant in 40 caliber, and this is the nickel version, like Hans Gruber's P7, and these were only made in 1992. Now, the P7 was part of a series of police pistols that was introduced in Germany alongside the Walther P5 and the Sig P6. And it's my understanding that police departments were allowed to choose from any of these three approved pistols. But the HK was definitely the most interesting. Now, those others are still collectible, but the P7s are the ones that I said have attained that cult-like status. Now, I actually own 3 P7s, but I have actually never fired any of my personal ones. 2 of these are unfired, my M8 and my M13. This PSP is kind of a rare one, and I want to show you the differences between that and the M10. But before I get to take this to the range and show you everything about it, I always want to thank the people that make these videos possible. First and foremost is the owner of this really cool and interesting pistol. He's a local fan and subscriber. His name is Jack. In fact, he's the second person named Jack that has lent guns to the channel, so I affectionately call him Jack number 2. So thank you again, Jack, for lending one of your amazing firearms for me to review on my channel. I always want to thank my Patreon supporters, because through their monthly donations and support, they help keep the lights on around here, and I could not do this without their support. And if you guys want to join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, there's a link in the description below, and you guys get to see all these videos early. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor, who provides all of the ammunition for these range reports and makes them financially feasible for me, my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And as I've mentioned many times before, if you're watching one of my reviews on a historically significant pistol, you probably have a love and attraction to guns like this. Guns that take wood panel grips. And you might be in the market for something cool and special for your Colt 1911, Beretta 92, CZ75, or Browning High Power. Who knows, maybe even a P7. I know Brownworks has been looking at making grips for one of these. Well, the perfect grip company you need to check out is Brownworks. Brownworks is a custom grip company making a wide variety of grips for a wide variety of firearms out of a wide variety of exotic woods and materials. Mark is an artist. He's a craftsman. He's always coming up with new and innovative features for his grips. He can apply custom logos, custom engravings, custom textures. He can finish these grips in a wide variety of colors. He can create his own laminate woods and even apply exotic materials like snakeskin and alligator skin to these grips to make them unique and one of a kind. Anything you can imagine and want, he can make. So I'm going to put a link to his website in the comment section below, as well as a coupon code for 10% off your first order. So please go over there, and when you place your first order for your set of custom grips, please tell Mark the Texas Gun Vault sent you. All right, so once again, let's talk about the pistol we will be shooting and reviewing today. A gun that is very famous. These things are highly sought after by collectors. People will pay what I think are obscene amounts of money for them. And those are just the basic versions. This one is a special rare version in 40. And you don't see many of these, and when you do, they're probably not in the nickel finish. So this one's kind of a unicorn gun. As I mentioned, it uses a gas piston delay system and the squeeze cocker. This gun was originally designed for police departments and originally came out as a gun called the PSP. Now the M is an Americanized version of this gun. There are a few differences, and in just a moment I will be showing you those differences, and I'll give you some more close-ups of this gun compared with the PSP. This version, as I mentioned, is in the nickel finish. This was only made in 1992, and it has the date code of KC, in case you were wondering. The 10 in the M10 refers to its capacity. So the M8 has 8 rounds of 9mm, the M13 was 13, and of course the M10 holds 10. And these magazines are quite interesting in their design because this gun was originally designed as a single stack firearm. So when they made them double stack, they still feed as though they're a single stack mag. So you can see it's very narrow here at the top. So that's what this gun is all about. So what I want to do now, when I'm talking about all the things that I like and don't like, I also want to compare these to my personal P7s and show you some differences between these variations. So let me go ahead and adjust the camera, and let's talk about how this gun is different from the other versions. So I have a few P7s out here that I want to compare and contrast this M10 with. So once again, here's kind of a close-up of this particular pistol that we will be reviewing. You can see the marks on it. It says M10. It was imported to Sterling, Virginia. And collectors really do care a lot about the markings on these guns, where they were imported, and the date codes. Symmetrical date codes, for some reason, are worth even more. Now, the P7 started off pretty much like this gun right here. Now, this is one of my personal ones. This is a PSP. It's a single stack 9mm pistol, and it has a heel style release here. And that is definitely something that most American shooters are not going to be used to. And you'll also notice that there's a part missing here that you'll find on these other pistols, and that's going to be a little heat shield. One of the big complaints of this design, because you do have this gas piston, which is right here below the barrel, this part of the gun, after you fire for a while, gets very, very hot. And HK eventually added that for the American market. So those are two of the biggest differences between these designs. So this one here was a police trade-in from the Lower Saxony Police Department. And it has some of those markings on the slide. There are a few other differences between these older ones and the newer ones, and they're pretty small, like this little bushing on the back. The ones for the US import were a little bit thicker, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But those are all very, very small differences. So when they finally decided to import these to the US, they realized they had to change them for American shooters. And here is my P7 M8. So this also takes a single stack magazine. It's 8 rounds, just like the PSP, but you'll notice they changed the magazine release. It's no longer here on the back of the pistol. Now we have a lanyard loop, but now it's a lever here on the side. It's not a push button, it's a lever. You push that down and the magazine will drop out. And because of that, of course, these magazines and these two guns are not interchangeable. You'll also notice here on the M8, we do have this heat shield, which was absent from the PSP. And here is this protruding bushing on the back I was talking about earlier. That's just a few of the differences. Now, of course, this is only a single stack 9mm pistol, and American shooters like their capacity. So eventually they came out with a double stack, and here is the M13. M13. Now, this was the model gun that Hans Gruber actually used in Die Hard, but his was nickel finished. This is the original finish on it. And you can see the differences between the thicknesses. Here we have the M8 and here we have the M13. And in my opinion, that M13 is almost too thick to accommodate that double stack magazine. But we still have all of the features of the M-type pistols with the magazine release here and that heat shield. And then that brings us to the M10. So we have the heat shield, we have that larger bushing on the back, we have the magazine release for American shooters, but this thing is also chunkier. So let's take a look here at the M13 compared to the M10. And you can see that gun has a much bigger top to the slide. It looks like it has a gigantic forehead, and that extra mass is probably because 40 is a much more powerful cartridge than 9, or at least it uses higher pressures. And they wanted to add a little bit of mass to this gun to slow down that slide, even though they have that gas piston system. And because of that extra weight, this gun looks and feels a lot chunkier than these other guns. In fact, when I saw this gun for the very first time, I was very surprised by how big it was, because pictures really don't do it justice. This is a big, heavy, chunky gun. It's not as sleek and slim as the other P7s. So that's some of the differences. All right, so let's talk about a few things about this gun that I do like. And the first thing I absolutely love about this pistol, of course, is the HK brand. I know everybody says HK hates you. And in some ways that's true, because they'll never make the guns you want or import the guns that you want. And they're very, very expensive whenever you can get a hold of them. But because of that, they are a very desired brand. They do make very high quality guns. Then, of course, I love the design of this pistol. You guys know I love anything different and mechanically interesting. And with this squeeze cocker and with that gas piston system, you have a pistol that is like none other. It is definitely different. Now, one thing I do like about the Americanized versions, of course, is going to be the magazine release in a more typical place. And I also like the fact about how safe this gun is. There are many stories about these guns being used by criminals and the criminals not even knowing how to use them. There's a story where a police officer had his P7 taken from him, and the criminals tried to fire it and they couldn't figure out how to make it work, because you have to pull that squeeze cocker back to fire the gun. An interesting artifact about its design, all it takes to fire the gun is to have the trigger and the squeeze cocker back, and it doesn't matter which order you do it in. Of course, most people are going to pull the squeeze cocker, then the trigger. But you can pull the trigger and then squeeze cock it, and it will fire. But I don't think many people are going to try to shoot it that way. Now, the last thing I really like about this gun is the trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and get out the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge, and I'm going to show you what this trigger is all about. And as always, before I measure this trigger, I always want to show you the take-up and the reset. So let's go ahead and drop the magazine, ensure there is no ammunition in it, and of course, safety check the gun. Looks like we are good. Now, of course, we do got to pull that squeeze cocker back, and here is our take-up. It's kind of heavy and mushy, and it breaks unpredictably. There's just a lot of grit in that. Then we have a long reset, and then we got that mushy take-up again. But it breaks pretty crisp. It's kind of weird. Certain aspects of this trigger feel bad, and then certain parts feel really good, but I think it breaks relatively light. So let's go ahead and get out the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge. Let's clear the averages, and let's see what this trigger pulls at. For our first pull, we have 3 pounds, 1.0 ounces. 3 pounds, 4.5 ounces. 2 pounds, 4.5 ounces. 2 2 pounds, 10.2 ounces. And finally, we have 3 pounds, 3.4 ounces, which gives us an average of 2 pounds, 14.3 ounces. So that is a really, really light trigger. And normally I would say that is too light for a duty or concealed carry gun, but with this squeeze cocker and the internal mechanism and how this trigger feels, I actually feel like this is one of the most safe handguns you could own and carry. So that's what this trigger is all about. And before we get into the things that I don't like, I do want to show you the field stripping of this pistol. Now, normally I would make a field strip video dedicated to mechanically interesting guns, but the field strip of this gun is so easy, I don't have to do it. All you have to do to take this gun apart is push this button right here in the back. You push that into the frame, bring the slide back, it will come off, and then forward off of the barrel. And that pretty much is a field strip. There it is. You have your slide, your frame, and your recoil spring. And here is that gas piston system I was talking about. So in this barrel, there is a little hole down here that vents gas downward, which compresses a chamber, preventing this piston from coming back into the gun until the pressures are lowered to safe levels, and then the gun can cycle. And that's how it works as opposed to the Browning tilting barrel system. And in order to put this back together, you just put the recoil spring over the barrel. And sometimes this reassembly can be a little bit tricky to line up that piston into that chamber. Might take me just a second here. But when it goes, it goes. It's relatively easy. It's just a trial and error thing. There it is, and the gun is back together. So I didn't make that look as smooth as I possibly could have, but that's the field strip of this gun. And as I said, I think reassembly is a little bit harder than disassembly. But now let's talk about a couple things about this gun that I don't like before getting it to the range and seeing how it shoots. The first thing I don't like about this gun is probably what a lot of collectors are going to love about this gun. I'm just not a big fan of nickel finishes. For me, give me the classic black look. That just looks way better, and I also don't have to worry about cleaning this gun with certain solvents that may damage the nickel. I think when it comes to a military or a police firearm, I'm just a bigger fan of a black finish over a shiny nickel finish. Now, the other things about this gun I don't like have to deal with its size. I already showed you earlier how bigger and chunkier this M10 is as compared to the other variants. So I just don't like its thickness. It's really big, especially here, and the frame. It weighs a lot because of that extra mass. And then, in general, when it comes to the P7s, I've never been a fan of the shorter barrels. You have a very short sight radius here, and these guns are supposed to be very accurate because those barrels are mounted in the frame. But we do have a short barrel, and I've always felt like they looked a little bit weird where you have this big, chunky frame, even with the 9mm versions, but then you have this short slide. It just never looked very balanced to me. But it may shoot great, and that's what we're about to find out. So let's go to the range. So as always, when it comes to a pistol, we're going to start off at 7 yards. I'm going to put 2 magazines through this and see how it shoots. Does it live up to its mythical reputation? Well, we're going to have to find out. So once again, I'm going to set the target at 7 yards, 2 magazines, and let's see what my initial thoughts and experiences are. And for sure, that is definitely a very different experience. Having to put that much pressure on the front strap of a pistol grip is not something you normally train to do. It's my instinct to let it go after every shot. So if you owned a P7 or ever got to shoot a P7, it's something you have to be very mindful of. And I kept having to go, oh yeah, don't let that go. It's kind of weird and definitely different. All right, so now let's talk about the accuracy of this gun. It's pretty good accuracy. I would say it's good range or duty accuracy, but it's not the tack driver that I was expecting it to be. Everybody says the P7 is innately a very accurate gun because the barrel is fixed in the frame. But when it comes to other pistols that have this design, I don't shoot them any better. It's good accuracy, but it's definitely not a tack driver. But now let's talk about the recoil impulse of this gun. Once again, everybody says the P7 has a very soft recoil impulse, but I think that's just wishful thinking because the gas piston system is so different and everyone wants it to work better than every other system in the world. But for me, it's about the same, maybe a little bit more. I would say it feels in the recoil department like an HK USP 40 compact. It's nothing really to write home about. It's a 40. It's a little bit snappy. All right, so now let's double the distance on this target, put a few more rounds down range. I'm going to aim for the head on this silhouette, and we're going to see if I discover anything else about this gun that I like or don't like, and I'll report back to you. So let's get back to the range. And I still feel like we're getting good range or duty accuracy. It's nothing to write home about. Now, I did throw a couple of those shots, and I know exactly why I did. It's because of this squeeze cocker once again. There's a lot of pressure on the front strap of this pistol, and when you're trying to stage that trigger, if you're not anticipating where this trigger is going to break, you're probably going to pull it in one direction or another. So that's what I'm discovering about this gun. Now let's talk about that one failure to feed. Yeah, I wasn't expecting this, and we're not even at the hollow point test yet. Now, what's causing this? Well, I think it has to do with that barrel that is put into the frame. It doesn't move. One of the advantages of this design, as I mentioned, is people say it has better accuracy. But because that barrel does not tilt, you don't get the advantage of that angle as the round is being fed from the magazine as it goes on to the feed lips. When it comes to a Browning tilting barreled action, when that barrel tips up, the rear tilts down, and you have a better angle for that round to enter the chamber, but you don't get it with these. And sometimes I have found with guns with this type of barrel design, we do have feeding issues, but it was only one and it never happened again. So that just could have been a one-off thing, but we'll have to see what happens in the rest of this range report. All right, so the next thing I want to do, of course, is the bench rest test. I want to set the target out at 25 yards. So far, I've gotten decent accuracy with this gun. So hopefully, if I take as much of the human element out of the equation, I'm still going to get a pretty darn good group. So let's go back to the range, put some more rounds through this at 25 yards, and see what the best I can do with this pistol is. And once again, we get a pretty good group. It's good duty or range accuracy, but this is definitely not the same as, let's say, a modern 2011 pistol. I'm very happy with that group, with pretty much every other gun that I would review. But of course, this is a very rare and expensive gun, and sometimes I have those high hopes that they're just going to outshoot everything else. But it doesn't. It's still good though, and definitely better than many other guns that I review. But maybe my expectation was something a little bit better, but it's definitely good. All right, so now the next test I want to do is the hollow point test. Obviously, we've already had one failure to feed, so maybe now as we put hollow points through this, we might discover that it doesn't like them. You know, some people are going to buy this gun as a self-defense gun. I know, it's really a collector's gun now, but this gun was designed for police and military use, and obviously people are going to carry this gun or want to use it for home defense. And in that case, will hollow points feed? So hopefully they will, but let's go back to the range and find out. And we had absolutely no issues, and I'm really happy to see that. I was actually kind of worried after I had that one failure to feed with the ball ammunition, but so far that's been the only problem. It's been functioning flawlessly ever since. All right, so the next test I want to do is my typical self-defense test. I want to, of course, see how fast I can shoot this gun. It's going to be kind of weird to keep all that pressure on that squeeze cocker as I'm trying to shoot it fast. I also want to see, can I drop the magazine out, get a fresh one in, and get the gun back in action? And finally, I want to know, is this gun point shootable? Because as I always say, in a self-defense scenario, you might not have time to draw your weapon, line up those sights on target. You might just have enough time to point the gun at what you're trying to stop and pull the trigger. And in that case, is the gun naturally pointing? So let's go back to the range, let's shoot this gun fast, and see how it does with these other tests. So let's break the results of this test down. Was I able to shoot this gun fast? I really don't think I was able to, and a lot of that has to do with the mechanism with that squeeze cocker. It's just really kind of odd, and you really can't always feel where that trigger is going to break. Now, when it came to the magazine change, it was absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with that, and when you drop the magazine, it shoots right out of the gun, so you can do that pretty quick. Now, when it comes to the point shootability of this gun, most of those rounds were on target, but it's not as good as other guns I have shot, and once again, I'm going to blame the squeeze cocker. You're just putting a different pressure on a different part of the gun than you normally do shooting other pistols. So it's something I think you can overcome with training, but if you're not used to shooting the P7, you might struggle with this. So there's something else now I want to talk about since I'm done with the shooting portion of this range report, and something that you don't get a sense of just watching this. I actually had to wait about 5 or 6 minutes from the hollow point test to that defensive use test. Why, you ask? Because the gun is getting really, really hot. And now that I've done the mag dump test, essentially, The side of this gun is becoming so hot, it's uncomfortable and pretty much burning my finger. So I got my laser thermometer out and I wanted to show you how hot the side of this frame is getting, especially where you're going to put your finger when you take it off of the trigger. So let me show you the heat I was getting off this frame. And even with that heat guard, we're talking over 140 degrees. That is really hot. It's pretty much burning my finger. And I've really only put about 120 rounds to 150 rounds through this gun. That's it, and not really in all that short of a time. And it's so hot, the gun is becoming unshootable. And I have heard of people complaining about this, and I heard it's even worse with the European versions without that heat shield. So that's definitely something to note. So what are my final thoughts on the HK P7 M10? This is definitely a very high quality and well-built handgun. In fact, it is probably the best gun with that gas delay piston system. There's other companies that have copied this, but they just never quite live up to expectations. But HK really did it right. Now, if you are a collector, I think you're really going to love this gun. You're going to want one in your collection, especially a rare variant in 40 and with the nickel finish. However, if you're a shooter and somebody that looks at guns as just tools, well, I'm going to quote the old saying that says, don't ever meet your heroes, because you might be disappointed. And in the case of this gun, I think you would be disappointed. It does not shoot as well as all the people say it does. It's not as soft shooting. It's definitely nice. It's well built, but I think it's going to let you down because everyone talks about the legend of the P7. And honestly, it just shoots like another gun. But it is cool, it is collectible, it is rare, and it is different. But as a shooter, you may not like it. And the other thing about this gun you would have to get used to if you owned is the manual of arms. That squeeze cocker is just so different. It's not bad. In fact, it's kind of a safety feature that I wish other guns would incorporate, because I do think as the gun sits, it's a very safe design, because that striker is not even pulled back at all. If you drop this gun, it's going to be 100% drop safe. And it pretty much acts as a safety because you have to really pull that squeeze cocker back hard for you to want to fire the gun. This thing is probably very unlikely to have a negligent discharge. You really have to want to shoot it. And I do like that about this gun. So on my star system, how would I rate the HK P7 M10? Well, some things about this gun I absolutely love, and some things I'm okay with. So on my star system, I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Not the world's greatest review, but definitely not the worst. A solid showing for a very rare unicorn gun. I have a feeling that other variants of the P7 would probably shoot a little bit more of my liking, and I would give it a higher rating. But in 40 caliber, with such a big, heavy, chunky gun, it shoots okay. So 4 out of 5 stars, I think, is a good rating. So what do you guys think? Do you own a P7? Have you ever shot a P7? And do you own any of the rare versions like the M10 or the K3? Tell me in the comments section below. And do you believe in the legend of the P7? Are you a member of the cult of the P7? It'd be fascinating to find out what you guys think about this legendary design. So, as always, thanks for watching.